All right, here we are. Welcome. Hey, thanks for dropping by during the stream today. Here it is, a good Saturday afternoon, and I've been playing with AI. We've had some time off this week with family. It's been really great to have some time. Thanksgiving, good time with family, time to reflect, have some gratitude, and jump right back into the world of AI. So in today's time, we're going to talk through really the huge amount of things that have been going on. Microsoft and OpenAI have really dominated the news cycle. I wanted to dive into this last week, and unfortunately we had some streaming problems, so I just held off on it, and I've still got it to talk about. And the good news here is that some of the developments that we were going to talk about last week are a lot more settled this week because we've had some time for the news cycle to finish and for decisions to be made. But I want to start today's off just like we were going to do last week, covering some of the announcements coming out of Microsoft Ignite. And especially after last week, I think it's very important for us to understand what kinds of capabilities and services Microsoft is really looking at. Because when Sam was dismissed from OpenAI, that immediately opened up the door for Microsoft to really swoop in behind the scenes and take advantage of the situation. And it looks like, while Sam is back, he was going to join Microsoft to keep doing his work. So that's something we need to pay some pretty careful attention to. But we'll come back to that in a little bit. But let's start off with Ignite. Now, there were a lot of really big announcements, and I cherry-picked a few things just to throw up onto the slide right here. But, the first thing that I really want to talk about is the fact that Microsoft now has not only been working on their AI chip, they have made enough progress that they have announced it. So at Ignite, they shared with the public that they have two critical capabilities in the chip development space that they've been working on. Now, to be clear, this is not a publicly available resource, but Microsoft has publicly stated that they are using these new chips to serve workload both internally and on their Azure platform. So they're not things that you and I can jump in and grab an instance, but they are things that services that we use, particularly SaaS services in Azure, are using these new chip capabilities. So that's a pretty big deal. We've seen Microsoft jump into the hardware business a few times, and in some spaces they have not only started the hardware, but they've continued to not only support it, but further develop it. Still no word on if they're going to support my joystick from 1997, but you can't win them all. So the other big announcements I think that are really worth our attention are things like Copilot being announced across Microsoft 365, Azure Cloud, Teams, and other places. If you are running Windows 11 on your PC today, there is an update available if you are on the most recent release of Windows 11. For those of you at home, that's a pretty simple upgrade. If you're using Windows 11 at work, I would not expect this to hit your PC anytime soon, but they have made it readily available. So I did a video, it was probably over a month ago now, showing off Copilot on the PC and the minimal amount of integration that they worked into Windows 11. And look, the space is still developing, so I wouldn't say that it's exactly a Windows 11 Copilot, but it is really useful to have access to GPT-3 and 4 in your Windows environment at large. It's kind of like putting ChatGPT in its own separate bar. It does run inside of the browser that Microsoft provides, so it is going to take up resources. It's going to run really the full browser, so it does have some additional memory that goes with it. So there's some trade-offs, and I talked about a lot of that in the video, but this is an important development because it's opening up access to this, and it is becoming less and less necessary to have a subscription to these higher level, more capable large language models. But some of the developments that go along with the release of Copilot now, Copilot Studio is available. And this is in many ways akin to what OpenAI released with the ability to create your own GPTs. Essentially, this is the Microsoft internal development that has the parallel capability of GPTs. So I think this is very interesting. Hopefully I'll have an opportunity to play with that in the not too distant future and maybe even show it off here on the channel. Some other big advancements are, again, integrating AI into a larger subset of the portfolio. That's really what Microsoft is going after here. But I think, with all of the continued developments in Azure and really turning up and focusing on how generative AI can enhance your workflow and your productivity is the right move from Microsoft. There's a lot of value to be reaped there, and being able to apply it in the tool that you're using, I do think is useful. I've been using these tools for going on a year now, and while it is absolutely straightforward to pull up a session with ChatGPT and get what you need and then go and paste that into whatever tool you're using, there's a lot to be said for having AI directly integrated into the tool that you're already using. And it's because of that I've adopted several tools that really bring that integration directly into the tool, especially when you're looking at things like building a presentation. Being able to just have it pull in that graphic or generate that image, that's a really useful thing. And that's what Microsoft is really pushing with this concept of Copilot. So with that said, let me just pull up some of the keynote presentation that was a part of Ignite. And I just did a few cuts to share with you, and we'll play those 4 or 5 cuts, and I'll pause and talk over them just to kind of share those with you. And then we'll continue the discussion around what happened with OpenAI over the last couple of weeks.
To see people deploy their own copilots. And today, we're sharing lots of new data that shows real productivity gains that Copilot is already driving. We're taking a very broad lens to deeply understand the impact of Copilot on both the creativity and the productivity.
And I want to jump in here and add a few things to what Satya's talking about. These are measurements that they've taken over time with people using the tools for the various use cases. And really the amount of creative process that's enhanced with generative AI is pretty fantastic. And I think for us, that's really critical because that's where the new things are going to come from. Now, we can have a debate about artificial general intelligence, and perhaps we'll have that even later in the discussion today. But really being able to enhance how quickly we can create something, puzzle out a new idea, that is a tremendously valuable capability. And this is part of the reason that I'm so excited about these tools. But to be honest, Copilot being integrated for productivity and creativity are really just scratching the surface of what's possible. There really are thousands of use cases for this technology, and I spend a little bit of time each week thinking about where could this fit, what is the right way to use this, because there are right applications and wrong applications for any technology, and sometimes you just need to know what the right answer is with absolute certainty. And today, that's not generative AI.
The results are pretty striking. With copilots, we're able to complete tasks much faster. And that's having a real cascading effect on work and workflow everywhere. People who use Copilot are spending less time searching for information. They're holding more effective meetings. They're able to collaborate on work artifacts, right? Whether they're Word documents, spreadsheets, emails, all of them have richer context about their role, about their organization, so that they can collaborate much more and stay in focus. And of course, we're just getting started.
And that's exactly right. I mean, it really calls it out. This is really still very much the beginning, and Microsoft is getting this introduced into their portfolio of products across the board. And many companies have been trying to identify where is the right place to use this. there's been a lot of talk subsequent to the release of Copilot in terms of, is this really worth the price of admission? Because adding Copilot to your Microsoft 365 suite, it has a very high bar of entry, right? There's a minimum number of users that you have to subscribe for, and those users are basically on the order of $30 per user. Now, I easily spend that amount of money on the AI tools that I'm using. So, is it useful? I think it's likely to come out over time. We're going to see what the right level of cost is, but there's a lot of compute that has to be put in place behind the scenes to make this possible as well, and that has a cost. So everything is a trade-off at this point, and I think there is really a lot more that's going to happen in the space. We're going to see some real big pushes for larger companies to adopt this at scale because of the productivity numbers that we are seeing, but it's not going to benefit everybody, and I think that's really the key to take away from that discussion. So moving right along, we'll jump into the processors.
Very first custom in-house CPU series, Azure Cobalt, starting with Cobalt 100. Cobalt is the first CPU designed by us specifically for the Microsoft Cloud. And this 64-bit 128-core ARM-based chip is the fastest of any cloud provider. And it's already powering parts of Microsoft Teams, Azure Communication Services, as well as Azure SQL as we speak. And next year, we will make this available to customers.
So I want to talk about this from a compute standpoint, because this is an area for me that, honestly, I've been around the compute space for many years, and having done it for a decade inside of a very large corporation, I've had the opportunity to have deep discussions with the likes of Intel and NVIDIA, understanding their offerings, their roadmaps, where things are headed, and the development of the ARM-based processors is really beginning to have an impact now. We are really leaving the age of the Intel x86 or the AMD 64, if you want to be specific about it. Those processor architectures are really getting major competition from the likes of ARM. And what you're seeing with companies like Apple is adopting that ARM-based core architecture. A lot of the development of those processors has been heavily tilted toward more and more cores. What we see with Apple's M-class processors is that they are not only creating multiple core processors, but processors that have different kinds of cores to account for different levels of processing power and efficiency. Now, what you just saw there with Azure Cobalt is they are only using the highest power processors inside, highest powered cores inside of those processors. And from a data center perspective, that really makes sense, because your data center workload is not going to be partial load or a more efficient set of cores. That's largely the domain of mobile devices. Many companies are evolving this portfolio. There was a buyout not very long ago of a company that was making these specialized ARM processors. They now have been brought into Qualcomm, and Qualcomm has now released an ARM-based processor. It's very similar to what we're seeing with Azure Cobalt. So this is going to be an interesting space over the next couple of years. But with the capabilities that have been released, the other cloud providers have been expanding their ARM-based processor offerings. And in many cases, it is more cost-effective to use those processors, but it is an architecture change. And so your code has to be amended in order to run on a different set of processors if it is compiled code. And for those workloads that you control, you can easily move to an ARM-based processor environment. So I found this announcement to be really cool. I'm really honestly excited about what's happening in the ARM space, but I also don't expect that we're going to see the likes of Intel stand on the sidelines and do nothing. They're already releasing some AI-tuned processors. We're going to have a lot of development in that space over the next 18 to 24 months. It's going to be fun to watch. But we're not done with the processors. Let's hear how about the next one?
fully custom in-house AI accelerator, Azure Maya. Starting with Maya 100, designed to running cloud AI workloads like LLM training and inference. This chip is manufactured on a 5-nanometer process, has 105 billion transistors, making it one of the largest chips that can be made with current technology. And it goes beyond the chip, though. We have designed Maya 100 as an end-to-end rack for AI, as you can see right here. AI power demands require infrastructure that is dramatically different from other clouds. The compute workloads require a lot more cooling as well as their networking density. And we have designed the cooling unit, known as the Sidekick, to match the thermal profile of the chip and added rack-level closed-loop liquid cooling for higher efficiency.
So this, too, is really interesting to me because I spent a lot of time in the raised floor data center. That cooling rack is nothing to sneeze at. That's a pretty serious setup for a data center. That's also something that allows you to really control the environment that those chips are running in. And if you're building at the scale that Microsoft is, being able to produce maximum efficiency for the space and for the capacity is a super important thing. And so what you're seeing here is that they've actually integrated that cooling into the unit so that they can more tightly control the process. And essentially, they've crammed everything into 2 vertical units, 2 rack units. And I think this is a really interesting development. I love that they're showing this.
This architecture allows us to take this rack and put it into existing data center infrastructure and facilities rather than building new ones. And by the way, they're also built and manufactured to meet our zero waste commitment. So we're very, very excited about Maya. With Maya, we are combining the state-of-the-art silicon packaging techniques, ultra-high bandwidth networking design, modern cooling, power management, algorithmic co-design of both the hardware and the software. And we're already testing this with many of our own AI services, including the GitHub Copilot. And we will roll out Maya accelerators across our fleet, supporting our own workloads first, and we'll scale it to third-party workloads after.
So really cool things that are happening in the space. I really love this announcement. I love to see the hardware because I'm an infrastructure guy. This is interesting to me.
Silicon diversity is what allows us to power the world's most powerful foundation models. And all of our AI workloads, from Copilot to your own AI applications, so that when I say systems, this is the end-to-end innovation.
So what Satya's telling us about now is that they are not only focused on building their own processors, they are trying to build a system that allows you to develop whatever it is that you need. And there are many partners that they have to make that happen. So the first I want to talk about is that Microsoft has really been doing some tight work with NVIDIA.
For AI model development. Talking about this arc of AI, Jensen, of course, you've been at the core of this long before it became fashionable to talk about it. You were talking about it. What's your arc here of AI innovation going forward?
Well, generative AI is the single most significant platform transition in computing history. You and I both have been in the computer industry a long time. In the last 40 years, nothing has been this big. It's bigger than PC, it's bigger than mobile, it's going to be bigger than internet, and surely by far. This is also the largest TAM expansion of the computer industry in history. There's a whole new type of data center that's now available. Unlike the data centers of the past, this data center is dedicated to one job and one job only: running AI models and generating intelligence. It's an AI factory. This AI factory, you're building some of the world's most advanced, you're building the world's computer. That computer is now going to be augmented by AI factories all over. The second TAM expansion is where our industry has focused on building tools in the past, now you have co-pilots that use the tools. So in hardware, there's a brand new segment, AI factories. In software, there's a brand new segment, co-pilots.
Co-pilots, yeah.
These are brand new things that the world's never had the opportunity to enjoy. Big, huge TAM expansion. The first wave is the wave that we enjoyed, which is incredible startups like OpenAI and others who are part of the generative AI startups, cloud internet services. That's the first wave. We're now beginning the second wave, and is really triggered and kicked off by Copilot, Office or Windows 365 Copilot, basically the enterprise generation. The third generation, the third wave, is the wave that I think is going to be the largest wave of all, and the reason for that is because the vast majority of the world's industries run on it,
yeah.
which is heavy industries. And this is where NVIDIA's Omniverse and generative AI is going to come together to help heavy industries digitalize and benefit from generative AI. So we're really, quite frankly, barely in the middle of the first wave, starting the second wave. This is going to be...
I love that, 3 waves, and all happening somewhat in parallel, but there's staging of it, and I think it all accrues. It compounds across all 3.
That's right.
Maybe
It's fun to watch these discussions because I really agree with what we're hearing from these guys. They've been on the front lines. They've seen where this technology has been. Look, we've all been around from the really beginning of the story of the internet, and I think that Jensen is 100% right. The generative AI is going to be bigger than the internet. This is a big deal, and there's a lot of opportunity here for those of us that jump on this and begin to learn the technology, learn how to apply, and figure out what to do with this. Because while there's a lot of fun to be had just kind of playing with it and, you know, having a Q&A chat session, that's fun, right? But there's a lot more opportunity here. And I think this evolution of the data center that Jensen is talking about is also something we need to pay attention to. Because as a manufacturer, NVIDIA is really close to the demands that are being granted by companies that are building data centers. And obviously, there's probably no one that is building at the scale that Microsoft is today. And the fact that NVIDIA and Microsoft are partnered in that is a critical thing to notice. Because whoever can get their hands on this hardware is going to enable these at-scale productions to happen. But Jensen talked about something that's really critical, and that is this is an entirely new data center footprint. What we saw a few minutes ago with Azure Maya allows Microsoft to adapt their existing data center footprint to leverage the AI-focused workload. But make no mistake, brand new data centers are being built all the time, and those new data centers are going to have an AI footprint. We've also got many other companies that are working on and developing these kinds of capabilities so that they can do it at scale, because the training is where things are at today. Will it be that way tomorrow? Well, I think we need to go have the OpenAI discussion before I can finish that thought. So let's talk about the models and why the data centers are being built out to support the model development, and then we can jump into talking a little bit about OpenAI. So here's Satya talking about model development.
to our catalog. With Stable Diffusion, you can generate beautiful immersive images. With Code Llama, you can generate code. Mistral 7B, you can translate and summarize text. With NVIDIA's Nematron 3 family of models, you can build general-purpose AI apps. All these capabilities are deeply, deeply integrated with our safety guardrails. And today, we are taking one more big step in support of open source models. We're adding a new models as a service offering in Azure. You know, this, yeah, it is a big deal. It makes it
is
simple.
a big deal.
Because this will allow you to get access to these large models that are all available in open source as just hosted APIs, right? Without you as developers having to provision GPUs so that you can focus on development, not back-end operations. We're excited to be partnering with Meta on this. It starts with Llama 2 as a service. You can fine-tune Llama 2 with your data to help the model understand your domain better and generate more accurate predictions. We want to support models in every language and in every country. And we are partnering with Mistral to bring their premium models as a service, as well as with Group 42 to bring JIS, the world's highest quality Arabic language model, again, just as a service. Now, when we talk about open source, there's one more very exciting thing that's happening in this space, and that is SLMs. Microsoft loves SLMs. In fact, one of the best is Phi, a model that is built by Microsoft Research on highly specialized data sets, which can rival models that are even 50 times bigger. In fact, Phi 1.5 has only 1.3 billion parameters, but nonetheless, it demonstrates state-of-the-art performance against benchmarks testing things like common sense, language understanding, and logical reasoning. And today, I am thrilled to announce Phi 2. It's a...
Now, I haven't had a chance to play with Phi 2 yet, but the important message that I want you to take away from this section is Microsoft is going after not building only on one kind of model. They understand that this is where the future of the generative AI space is going, and so much so that they are now developing their own customized models, and they're making it easy for many of us to build a customized model without having to start from the very beginning by being able to take a Llama 2 or a Mistral and build our own data sets and train on top of those. You're able to get the more comprehensive model without having to start from scratch. And doing that as a service is really powerful. The other thing that I really want to talk about in closing out this discussion about models is that one of the cool things about what we're learning with these large language models is effectively you're taking terabytes and terabytes of data and you're ultimately compressing it into a model that is gigabytes in size. That's pretty phenomenal. That's going to allow libraries worth of information in our pockets without the need for internet. And I think that that is probably going to have a bigger impact than anyone is really deeply thinking about at this point in time. So being able to take that terabyte set of data and plug it into a mobile device that goes with you wherever you are and is not dependent upon internet connection is incredibly powerful. And we're already starting to see embedded devices that enable that capability. You may have seen an announcement last week from a brand new company. They've released the AirPin that I think in some ways is going to compete with the likes of the iPhone, or at least smartphones, because you wear it on you and you talk to it. It has a display projector in it, and I think it's an interesting device. I'm not particularly looking to get one, at least not right now, but that's the kind of thing that we're looking at. Now, it's an internet-connected device today, and therein lies the limitation. I think I'd be much more interested in a device that does not need an internet connection, because I'm already carrying around a device that has an internet connection. I don't need yet another internet-connected device to carry with me. I've got enough of those already. But this is where I think things are going to get really interesting. And as we have more and more of these fine-tuned models that are built around specific purposes, that's going to make a big difference in the knowledge that we're able to get access to and what we carry around with us as we go. So let's jump back into some of the things that have been happening. Look, the phone really lit up on Friday after Sam Altman was dismissed. And what's interesting is if you go look at OpenAI's blog right now, the announcement of Sam Altman's dismissal and the reorganization is still up. They have not updated the blog with the latest happenings. And the latest happenings are basically that after several days of lots of really interesting discussions, bringing in Satya Nadella to really help even out the discussion and show the value. Sam is back at OpenAI. There's been some board changes, so now we got this new guy, Brett Taylor from Salesforce, Larry Summers, and it looks like Adam D'Angelo is still around, still a part of the board. And a couple of days ago, we started talking about this thing called Q-Star. And I want to talk about this a little bit more because I think it's relevant on a couple of different dimensions. But this seems to be the rumored reasoning that triggered all of this activity with Sam. Apparently, some of the development team let the board know that either they have accomplished or they're very close to realizing this capability called Q-Star. And I've been reading a lot about it. I'm not an expert in this yet, but I'll give you my read on it. But I think what's more important for us to talk about first is what this means from a leadership standpoint. And I'm characterizing it as a leadership mistake. And the reason I say that is, on the one hand, OpenAI and the board, they took a position and they said, all right, Sam, this is it. We're getting rid of you. We're pushing you out of the organization. And within, about 72 hours, that was reversed. So when you see a reversal, I think you can call that a mistake. I think that is absolutely fair game. But it's important for us to see what went on. What were the mechanisms behind that? What was said publicly? And what really led up to that major change and how it was handled. I think there are two big things that I take away from this situation. The first is it was very abrupt. They took action. And I think it is important that we take action. Make a decision and go after it. I want to say there's some good things that happened in the reversal because there was an acknowledgement of the things that were happening. The reality was that the development team really was looking at all of the things that could happen. Around if Sam wasn't the CEO. And that was such a destabilizing force inside of OpenAI. I think they really had no choice. And it was important for them to make the reversal and bring him back, because that's what leaders do. They understand when they've made a mistake and they make a change. So studying all of the things that happened around what the board said publicly, there was a whole bunch of rumor that got kicked out. I think that too is really important to understand. If you are not providing the detail, then rumor is going to dominate the conversation. And that's an opportunity for us to learn. We need to use the mistakes that other people are making to inform our own so that we don't have to make those very same mistakes. So I think we're definitely looking at a Harvard Business Review case study around the decisions the board made in dismissing and or bringing back Sam Altman. So really interesting set of circumstances. The importance of how they are conveying what they're doing to the organization is really important. Enabling innovation in a responsible way is super important. And I think OpenAI sort of typifies that in a lot of ways because they've been pushing forward. But not everybody is aligned, even at the highest levels. And I think that's an important thing for us to understand. The more we can provide insight into the why of what it is that we're doing, I think that's really essential. It prevents these kinds of major earthquake situations. I think there was a huge opportunity for things to have gone a totally different way here, and anything we can learn and take away from that is really valuable. Well, so let's talk about this Q-Star thing for a minute. Now, I've been reading about this for the last couple of days. I'm not an expert on this, but let me see if I can give you the lowdown. What the team shared with the board effectively was that OpenAI was very near or had accomplished this concept of Q-Star. And I still don't really understand where Q-Star came from, but essentially, here's what Q-Star is. Q-Star is the ability for the system to track what it learns. So essentially, at a core level, it makes a table of things that it's going to try. and then it does things to try it out. And when it gets an answer, it records that answer, and it learns from whatever it is that it's done. So it is informing from a data set perspective. Every time it tries something, that becomes accretive to its knowledge because it can remember that answer. And in remembering that answer, the next time it goes to do that kind of a task, it's going to look up the best answer and use that. Now, it does this so much so that it can constantly be testing things and identifying what the best way to solve a problem might be. Now, I have to be honest. I'm reading about Q-star and what it means. This, again, like many things in AI, is not a new development. In fact, this is something that someone figured out a number of years ago. So don't be confused in terms of the principles that are being ironed out here. This isn't something that just OpenAI discovered. Oh, gee, we should try things out and record it. No, that was something that people understood many, many years ago. But the development here seems to be that they found an effective way to do it, and an effective way to do it such that having to have the traditional data sets behind it is no longer necessary. So what this means is the go-forward posture of developing large language models or improving large language models or getting to whatever the next stage in artificial intelligence is will not require an increasingly large data set because there's this mechanism built into it that allows it to try and learn. And we've seen this in the training of many different AI systems over the long term. One of my more favorite YouTube channels is a channel that basically talks about the more recent AI papers, and the channel is called 2-Minute Papers. And what I love about the channel is it talks about the paper, but it also shows you some of the things behind those developments. And we've seen simple robotic devices that virtually created that can learn how to move. And it is simply by try and retry. So we know that computers can figure these things out simply by the trial and error process, the process of learning. And that's how the human brain works, right? I mean, when humans are learning to move around the world, it is exactly this kind of a system, right? We try to walk, we fail, we try again, and we do it again and again until we figure it out and we know how to walk. So this is an important development. Is it the biggest thing ever? Well, that's debatable. I don't think we really know yet. I think it's interesting. I think it's something to pay attention to. And if we're able to move into this synthetic data phase where we no longer have to provide terabytes and terabytes of data to inform the decisions, but instead the machine can learn on its own, that's something to pay attention to, because that gets us closer to this concept of AGI where it is able to learn so fast that it exceeds our own capabilities. I'm still very much on the fence in terms of, is that really a possibility in the near term? The opinions are very much divided, but I think it's something that we should pay attention to. This is interesting. And from a learning standpoint, this is what I want to share, right? I read all of the stuff about Q-star, and I immediately thought, this is the mistakes framework. What is the mistakes framework? It is the framework that allows you to step through all of the things that need to happen in order for you to understand how to be successful. Now, is Q-star a derivative of the mistakes framework? No, it's not. I guarantee you most of the AI space doesn't even know what the mistakes framework is. But the value of this kind of capability is not to be understated, because it is in making mistakes and learning how it doesn't work that largely informs Q-star. See, it's not just what's successful. It records all of the outcomes and it remembers them. So we can go back and pull out a less effective means of accomplishing a task and use that to try something new. That's what's really interesting about the mistakes framework. It is creating not only what works, but it's pushing us forward into trying things so that we can learn quickly. Because the sooner you're able to try something, the more likely you are to learn something. These two things are directly related. And when machines can try something to learn something, that's a pretty significant shift. And when we talk about the mistakes framework, right, here's all of the steps: mapping, investigating, sketching, then testing, learning in each stage of that process. And if something disruptive happens along the way, we can go back to the previous step, use what we learned to improve, and then move forward again. And so the mistakes framework has this mechanism of moving back and forth, because sometimes something you learn is disruptive enough that you have to go back and recalculate from the very beginning. But if you don't, you can continue to move forward. If you've been successful in what you've done, if you mapped out the idea sufficiently to understand the landscape, you can move right on into investigate. And investigate, you're going to confirm, you're going to set up your hypothesis, set criteria so you know what you're working on, so you can then get to work sketching it out, trying things, adapting it as you're learning, because if you're testing right, you're going to learn something that is going to need some level of adaptation, and then you can get to a point where you can launch it and put it in the hands of others to experiment with it. And because here's the reality of this. You look at what OpenAI has done with ChatGPT. They've been learning from our feedback at every stage of the game. In fact, part of the controversy about what OpenAI has been doing is that our interactions are being recorded and used in the learning of the models as well. They're applying exactly this rubric. They have turned out something, they're letting us work with it, they're continuing to improve it, they're constantly measuring the effectiveness of it, altering it, making it better. And now they're in this sustain phase, and I think that that's really a bigger part of the discussion around the decisions that the OpenAI board has made. They're charged with bringing this concept of AGI, and some of the debate, at least the speculation that has entered the larger discussion external to OpenAI, is the fact that Sam has been charging forward and finding ways to monetize and drive revenue and enable them to grow compute. And all of those things are necessary in order to sustain the work that OpenAI is doing, because without the compute behind their development process, they can't go anywhere. And some of the more interesting companies that are out there figure out how to drive and push the envelope of what's possible, but to create revenue in the process. Because without that revenue, the organization cannot exist. All right, so we've talked about OpenAI, we've talked about Microsoft, we've got about 15 minutes left, and I just want to share a few really interesting things that I've seen come across the radar this week. Things that I need to spend more time on, quite honestly, but I want to share what I'm excited about with all of you in the few minutes that I have left. And I'm going to switch around the screen arrangement here so we can talk about some of these developments. But basically, what we're talking about with this first item, we've got Stability AI has released. Right tab to share with you. I want this one. Let's see if that works. So Stability has been really at the forefront of this open model capability. And to be totally honest with all of you, where I really got deep into generative AI was with the release of Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion allowed me to use my own computer processing power to create images. And I could do it as much as I wanted. And that was important because I was able to iterate quickly. And the faster you can iterate, the more rapidly you could learn. So that was really my introduction to prompting and understanding how prompts really have a big impact on what it is that you're getting out of the system. Well, Stable Diffusion this last week has released Stable Video Diffusion. And what's interesting about this is that now you can create moving video. Now, up until this point, people have been playing with this on their own. This is really a more comprehensive packaged version. And so it has some very specific constraints. You see here just from their release notes, right? It is trained to generate 14 frames at a specific resolution. And if there's anything we've learned from the speed of development in the space, is that once a core project provides the outer framework, people are going to extend it, right? If it's 14 frames, people are going to push it beyond that. The tooling is going to go beyond that. You're going to have more powerful processors that people are going to put against this to do more frames. So we're just very much at the beginning. But now there's a GitHub repo out there. You can go out there and grab this generative AI model and play with it on your own system. And so this is something I'm definitely going to be spending some more time on. Here is the stable diffusion page that provides some of the description around what's possible. There's an XT version of this that gets you to 25 frames. They're talking about, what it's primarily good to be used for, what kind of limitations might be involved. So you might want to check it out on Hugging Face as well. But I'm really intrigued by this, and I want to get my hands on it and play with it. I did have a little bit of a chance to play with Runway ML, but because I don't spend enough time in the video and image generation space, I'm just not really willing to sign up and use Runway ML for a very long time. Yeah, I'm making videos like this for YouTube, but it's not my strong suit, and you kind of have to decide what it is that you're going to work on. This is something I want to play with, and it's free for me to play with it. And I really do think that open is the future of these kinds of capabilities. I really love what Stability AI has set themselves up to do and what their mission is. I think there's some huge opportunity. They won't be the only ones, but I definitely think that they are doing a good job at keeping up and staying ahead of what's happening. Okay, so that covers Stability AI. Now I've got a few other tabs here that I'm just going to pop through this series of tabs and share with you some of the things that we're seeing. This open model space is constantly evolving, and look, people are doing all kinds of things to develop the capabilities. There's a couple of new repos out there that help us to kind of keep up with what's going on. One of those is this hallucination leaderboard. It is there to help us keep up with who has the most hallucinations, who's getting effective at having the model turn out a good result, because it does undermine the effectiveness of the model if it's turning out some bad answers. My personal experience with that is looking at this chart. I really do prefer to use GPT-4 because it has a much lower hallucination rate. It's not the only model I'm using. I am using Claude 2 quite a bit because it's more optimized for writing and building something that's a little friendlier to read. So I do use that a lot. I'm still not using Google's tools all that much. Look, Bard has been out for a while, and it's wrong too often, and I just can't tolerate it. But this repo is where people are trying to share the updates to this information, and they've got the model here where you can go and play with it. So if you're interested in keeping up with those elements around what's happening in the models, you might want to check that out. Another big announcement that came out this week is you no longer have to pay for the ChatGPT Pro in order to get access to voice on your Android or iOS device. I've been using this a ton. I find it to be very useful. Honestly, this isn't quite enough to get me to stop paying for the subscription, but this is getting me a lot closer. And with some of these tools opening, I'm really surprised. I did not expect OpenAI to do this. So this means you no longer need a subscription to use the app, and you can talk to it. And there's some really cool applications for that. This means you can use it while you're driving because you can talk to it, and it will talk back to you. And you can have a really lengthy chat discussion using this. Now, it doesn't solve the busyness problem that OpenAI has had more recently, but it certainly does open up the opportunity for you to do some new things and play with it. Now, I've been a subscriber to Perplexity for a while, and one of the benefits that you get out of Perplexity is because I'm a pro user, I get access to their playground. And what's interesting about the playground is that they are making it really easy to work with various different models. So it's not showing up in the video feed. I have to click through each one of them. But they have a number of models that are available here that they're just loading for you. So I can interact with all of these models without having to run it locally on my PC. Ultimately, with most of these, like Mistral, the whole point is to get that onto my PC and run it locally and see what it works with. But in terms of evaluating prompts and becoming more familiar with the behavior of the model, this is pretty useful because it's using the Perplexity compute stack in order to give these answers. And I can do this while I'm on the move. So that's pretty cool. I don't know if you've thought about a subscription to Perplexity. I am a pro user. I've been using this a ton. I find it really useful for research because it works a little differently. I can switch between multiple different models. I find in terms of using, it will go out and get a collection of answers and organizes them really nicely. And it is a particular favorite of mine. This is what I use for my research. If you're interested in Perplexity at all, I do have a promo code that you can use, and it gives both of us a discount. So if you're interested in that, let me know. I'll put that in the comments if anybody's interested in that. There's a couple of other cool things that I've seen come across the radar before I run out of time here. This is an interesting development. This MindsDB resource basically is a virtual database. So it allows you to easily connect lots of data sources with an AI tool in a real-time way. Now, what's interesting about this is that a lot of new information is coming from diverse sources, and this takes a lot of the work out. So if you're doing any kind of development, this is something that you really ought to look into. I think this is really easing some of the friction in terms of developing applications and doing bigger things with AI. This means that you don't have to have an API that allows you to use those data sources. You can directly hook them together on your own. Now, OpenAI and Microsoft were in the news a lot over the last couple of weeks, and one of the big things that was in the news was OpenAI's Dev Day conference, and they released this concept of a GPT. Well, now we have from LangChain this concept of open GPTs, and essentially this is the open answer to creating a GPT. Now, it's not exactly identical. There are differences, but this does make it a lot easier, and it provides some of the more far-reaching developments that are in GPTs and the assistance API that OpenAI has provided that makes it easier to build these kinds of applications. So this is definitely something I'm excited about. Anytime the open community is able to replicate a set of functionality that is proprietary and make it easy to extend and build upon, I'm excited about that. I think that's really interesting. Something to keep an eye on. This week, there's also been the release of an updated version of Claude. They are making it easier to build things. You know, they're the ones that have had the larger token count open up. And speaking of token count, this guy Greg Kamrat, I hope I'm not butchering that, was talking about, you know, some of the things that are happening. Claude is now at 200,000 tokens, and they're developing that. But one of the things that Greg shared on his Twitter feed was this chart, and basically it's talking about the effectiveness of having that large of a token window. Context is really important, and the more context you can bring, it should improve the answer, but we're not exactly seeing a one-to-one improvement. Sometimes the use and the retrieval of those additional tokens is not being very effective. And so this is something to keep in mind. We saw the very same thing with the added context window size with OpenAI's GPT-4 and the Turbo product. We're seeing it in people building GPTs. They're loading huge documents into their GPT, and then when they start asking questions, the quality of those answers is not what they anticipated. It is, being really effective in the early part of the document. You see, even here, Claude very consistent along the front range, right? If it's at the beginning of the document, if it's the entirety of a smaller document, you're good. But for some reason, once you get into deeper and deeper and larger sizes of context windows, things don't go as well. And this is important for us to understand, because when we're adding these additional tokens on top of the model, That's not feeding or training directly into the model. That is a different function. So, this question and answer over your documents is something that's really valuable because the document is nice and self-contained. But I think what I'm seeing in this result is that there's still an opportunity to incorporate these data sets into a larger model rather than simply augmenting by loading in the token windows. So I expect there's still going to be some more development. I do think this is going to get better. I do think it's good that, we're growing the size of the tokens that you can work with, because the data sets that we have internal, that at a large company, right, you have so much internal data, and you're just not going to build a model on all of that. There's always going to be a need. There's always going to be some new bit of information that will be able to take advantage of a large language model and plugging that in. And understanding how good these models are at using that data is really important. Now, this is specific to the latest update to Claude. And listen, I think the Anthropic team does deserve some adulation because they are opening up the capability to go much, much bigger. But you probably need to think about this in terms of early feature set. It's not all the way there. I mean, there's an awful lot of red on the screen. And kudos to Greg for doing the work to figure this out. What a great chart to share with everyone. And in the efforts of sharing knowledge and information, I also came across IBM is building this thing called SkillsBuild, and basically what they're trying to do is provide a free educational resource for people to upskill, learn, and get credentials. And listen, as someone that has an AI course that's run on a cohort basis, I'm all for learning, and there are so many ways to learn. You just need to find the right way for you to learn. Maybe you need somebody there with you. Maybe you need a mentor to help you through it. Maybe you need a group that you can work with. These are all things that you can get from working with me on the mistakes course, the Business Pro course that I've built. We'll be running another cohort here in the next 90 days. So if you're interested in that, go stop by courses.ai-mistakes.com and enter your information there to find out when the next course is announced to be released. But in the meantime, there's lots of free ways that you can learn. Besides the YouTube channel, there's so many ways to get up to speed on the information that you need to be successful at using this technology. Don't wait. Get started. Find something to learn today. If you were here earlier to hear the conversation that Satya and Jensen were having, Jensen said this is bigger than the internet, and I completely agree. So if you're not finding new ways to get up to speed and learn and use this new technology, you're not preparing yourself for the future. I've seen it again and again. I'm not a big fan of AI is going to replace you. What I am a big fan of is that if you have the skill set to use AI and you have the skill set that you already do, you'll be unstoppable, because you are able to take advantage of these capabilities to a maximum degree, and it's very likely that you can help others to do exactly the same thing. So don't miss out on that opportunity. Go find some courses. Go take a look at IBMSkillsBuild.org. Go take a look at my course. Watch the rest of the content on the channel. There's several other creators that are daily providing updates and insights to the AI space. I'm consuming those. I've got newsletters that I'm signed up for. And speaking of newsletters, yeah, I've got one too. Go to ai-mistakes.com and sign up for the newsletter if you haven't already, because there's a lot of useful information that I'm consolidating and putting in that newsletter for you to keep up with the important things that are happening, because you can't keep up with everything. You need someone to help you work through it, and a newsletter is really a great way for me to share my thoughts with you, put it in front of you, and contribute back to the community, because there's a lot of great things that are happening. And with that, I think we'll close out today's discussion. I hope you all have a great weekend, and look, have some gratitude. I'm grateful for those of you that showed up for the live video today. I'm looking forward to doing more of these, and I'll continue to work on pre-recorded videos as I'm learning, sharing it with all of you. And with that, go make some mistakes. We'll see you next time.